Hello, everyone. So, welcome back to the next session, to this afternoon session, the last few presentations and panels for Mark. Yeah, thank you. Which will be the last few sessions which we had before the end of this conference. So, try to make the most of it. So, this is a spotlight presentation. So we'll have a presentation by Mark Christopoulos on incorporating voice of the market into portfolio choice. And Mark is head of R&D portfolio at Sangamo Therapeutics in the US. So after this presentation, there will be a panel discussion. So I welcome Mark to present us about applying voice of the customer to your product portfolio. So the stage is yours, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Matan. Hey, everybody. Thanks for your time today. So yeah, I was invited to come and chat with you all about voice of the customer and how it applies into the portfolio management process. And I've done it a couple of different ways, so I thought it was a great topic for me to kind of chat a little bit about from what I've been able to see and what I've experienced. And then very much looking forward to the panel discussion afterwards to hear what other people have seen and what has made sense for them. So a little bit about me. I work in the R&D portfolio for Sangamo Therapeutics. Some of you may know about Sangamo. We're a genomic company. We work on genomic therapy and genomic engineering to kind of tackle some of the most challenging diseases across the globe affecting humanity today. And many of these diseases that many of them are fairly rare, but because for a variety of reasons, because they're so challenging, they have yet to really be addressed by standard therapies. And so Sangamo has just a brave group of folks, courageous, that are going after some of these most challenging diseases with some really innovative technology focused on zinc finger technology to be able to try to treat diseases of this nature. In this group are diseases such as Fabry, various tauopathies, brain diseases like prion, neurological diseases, ALS is another example, and various T-cell therapies that we're going after, such as organ transplant rejection, things of that nature. So if you want to find out more, feel free to visit our website. But as you can imagine, it presents a number of different challenges, not just within the scientific space, but also logistically and being able to distribute logistically these therapies as we're getting ready to prepare, as we're preparing to bring them to market. What are all the different aspects that have to be looked at, not only from a scientific place, but also from a regulatory place and from a logistical place. And we'll get into that, how that plays into kind of portfolio decision making. Okay, so with that, so talking about the voice of the customer, there are a number of different methodologies out there that approach, go and tackle how do you look at voice of the customer. And I haven't really been familiar with any starting from scratch, taking a methodology and kind of deploying it. At my previous company, a lot of it was already in place. So as we tried to apply a portfolio look at how we collected information about voice of the customer, that re-engineering is kind of what I'm speaking from. So you can go look at a number of different standard voice of the customer steps that are out there. I think there's a 6-step process that I saw, a 9 or 12-step process. But I'd say the one thing that was common across the methodologies that I've seen, as well as the process that we used at previous customers that I've been at, previous companies I've been at, is what really helps make it work is starting with why, as you've heard, I'm sure, many different processes. That understanding why you're wanting to collect customer input is so crucial, so that you can understand really, are you trying to expand your market? Are you trying to create new products? Are you trying to improve your margins? Are you trying to just increase revenue? Understanding the why, I think, is key, because that helps drive everything else from there. As Then as you move from understanding kind of why you're wanting to do this, figuring out who are the right people you want to talk to in terms of customers, and understanding the questions that you want to ask is key. I think this is obvious, but you'd be surprised all the little decisions that get made as to how you want to ask your questions. A number of different people are involved in that process. People are seeing different angles of the elephant and trying to attack it from different directions. They have different perceptions as to who the core customers are and what their needs are. There's only so many questions you're going to ask, and you know, everything costs money. Budgets frequently limit how many customers you can talk to and how much you can talk to them. So it's really key to be clear on what are the different segments, what differentiates them, and how you want to ask those questions. Then as you move into actually, you've got you're collecting your data, being clear. I think Noel is the one that raised it up yesterday, being able to look for evidence for testing your assumptions with your customers. And what do you consider good evidence? Many times just asking them questions as to, you know, we've all heard the adage that if Henry Ford had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said they wanted just a faster horse. And so you can ask the customer what they want, but they're not necessarily going to tell you exactly what they need. So you're going to take your data, get your assumptions, and then you want to be able to test those to see where you've got your gaps. And then, of course, creating the KPIs that measure your progress. And in kind of in these back sections is really where portfolio is going to play a role. If you don't have the foundations on the left put in place, of course, you're going to start faltering in terms of how you set up, how you measure, how well you're doing. So finally, getting the trade-offs to drive your new directions is kind of the critical capability, right? If you got the foundational boxes wrong, your trade-offs are going to fall apart. But I have seen really a best practice is just avoid the default. We're all humans. We're all biased. We all have a subject to availability bias. A lot of us only like to see what we already believe. And so if you're not careful, you're going to ask questions that are just going to kind of underscore what you already think is true, and it's only going to underscore your current product suite and the portfolio decisions you've already made. So you want to make sure you're asking questions that really drive potential differentiation for your decision making going forward to make those decisions better. And then, as I said, using evidence to commit to your decisions. Confirm that your decisions are the right ones, and use evidence to revise that. You want to reward risk taking. Your company needs to be making tough decisions at all levels, and your leaders need to be able to be doing those trade-offs and feeling comfortable that the risks that they're taking are the right ones, and that they're okay with that. And then finally, cultivating accountability all up and down the chain. Potholes that I've seen that can create challenges. So in some cases, I've seen it at other companies where you're forming your voice of the customer questions around you. You're making it about you, not about them. The whole point of VOC is being customer centric, which again is just another buzzword, but really you're not trying to validate what you're already doing. You're not trying to validate decisions you already made. You're not trying to validate your current capabilities. You're trying to really understand, for better or worse, are you going in the right direction in your partnership with your various customer segments? And getting in the next box, I've seen in a previous company, we really didn't define our customer segments very clearly. We defined them more demographically or in terms of size. And in the med device industry, that can play a role perhaps in terms of how much they buy or what they can afford, but it doesn't really give you, in some cases, really understanding in terms of what they actually need in terms of differentiation, especially as you move from, in my previous company, moving from established Western markets with established healthcare systems and moving into other markets, which are developing markets, they've got different levels of needs in terms of not just cost, but also in terms of infrastructure, security, skill sets, etc. You don't want to play and ask questions solely around your capabilities, but you don't want to ignore your corporate strengths either. Creating, having the customer come back to you and say, well, we want you to invent a time machine doesn't really help you if you have no idea how to build a time machine, right? So you want to be sensitive. And then lastly, another pothole is defining segments by descriptors that are more around demographics instead of value-based needs. We'll get more into that shortly. Okay, so again, starting with the basics, understanding your customer segments. So many of you have probably already seen this business case. I read about it first time in Innovator's Dilemma, which by Clayton Christensen, a great series of books, actually. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend them. They're highly illustrative of how the power of understanding your customer can really play into how you do your portfolio management, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, in that business case, talking about Black & Decker power drills, right? So when you think about what is a major competitor for a Black & Decker power drill, the typical go-to for any kind of competitive discussion is availability heuristic. Again, saying, well, the major scenario use case I'm thinking about for a power drill is someone that needs a hole drilled, and so the direct competitors for a Black & Decker drill would basically be a drill by Makita or any other major manufacturer. And while that is true, the case study kind of looked at, well, think about it, what is the major buying pattern for people that buy specifically this price point of drill, and what is the problem that they're really trying to solve? And turns out it's not that the person buying the drill many times isn't necessarily the person that needs a hole drilled. So for example, traditionally, looking at how people have in this case study talked about people that thought about power drills and what the replacement was for those power drills. They thought of the segment in a very traditional fashion, that you've got your contractors, you've got your home do-it-yourselfers. Those are typically males in the typical age range of 25 to 45, and the problem they're trying to solve is they need a hole drill. So therefore, any replacement product for that would basically just be another drill. And of course, other products are like chalk and cheese. So for example, neckties, completely different problem that needs to be solved, slightly different age range, same gender, but these people are office workers, or they need to go to a special occasion, or the people that would typically be shopping for a necktie. They need to dress fashionably. Well, it turns out in this case study, again, I found it highly fascinating to help underscore why you need to really define your customer segments properly. Black & Decker specifically sees a big increase in sales around holidays, Father's Day and around Christmas. And turns out that in many cases, the person that's buying their particular product is a person that has an upcoming celebration. They are of any gender. They're a much wider typical age, and their problem has nothing to do with drilling a hole. Their problem is they need a gift. And lo and behold, neckties actually directly competes with that particular problem. And many times the neckties competes at the price point as well. So when you look at it that way, it's an interesting way of thinking about how your customer segments are organized. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up, as a portfolio manager, it is imperative that we understand the basic assumptions baked into the customer segmentation model and how we go about going after that voice of the customer data. Only then can you really, when you turn around and effectively are driving trade-off decision-making with your stakeholders, you can help answer these questions that are going to be coming up in the decision-making meetings around the trade-offs. Why does this particular project carry better benefit, have a higher score as it applies to particular customer segments? Okay, so let's talk about, once you have your segments figured out, kind of how do you go about the value drivers for those different segments, and then how, once you have your value drivers, going and collecting that data. So I'm not going to get into surveys or tools how you go collecting that data. That's a subject for a different discussion. But let's say you have the data. Here's a tool that I found just recently, actually. I read an HBR article. It's and the name of the title of the article is "Eliminate Strategic Overload," and there is a book published by the same author that just came out recently that I'm reading. It's a fascinating discussion how you apply this tool. Here's an example that came out of that article around a major bank out of Slovakia called Tatra, and they've got a number of competitors, right? And when applying this tool in this this case study that was used, they mapped out for this particular customer segment for premium customers, the way they describe those customers. Notice it is not in terms of age, it's not in terms of social status, and not in terms of the amount of money that they have or where they live, typical demographic descriptors. It is according to value drivers prioritized by what is most to least important. And that is a key component that you will need to be able to do your portfolio trade-offs. Having been in a situation where I did not have this, I had a tough time really trying to do my value trade-offs within the portfolio process. But as you can see, as is kind of demonstrated with this best practice, as you show what your company's capabilities are against these value drivers, as they compare against your competitors, it allows you to really kind of pull in, prioritize-wise, which are the things you want to focus on and how you want to differentiate where you're going to place your bets across your various projects. And as a follow-up example, for another customer segment, this is the mass market customer. Notice they've got a different set or similar set of value drivers prioritized differently. So number one for the mass market customers, number one, number two is keep promises and have a stable bank. Whereas for premium customers, it's having an excellent mobile app and products are easy to understand, right? So understanding the difference between your customer segments is key. And then being able to have data to be able to describe how do you stack up compared to your competitors is key. So you can figure out more easily where to place your bets within your portfolio process. So hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to ask questions. We'll hopefully have some time towards the end where we can talk about it. Okay, so now moving into applying it to actual portfolio decision making, where the rubber meets the road. So at a previous company that I worked at was a major radiation oncology treatment company. And within this space, within radiation oncology treatment, the customer segments broke down pretty easily. Again, looking at the Western healthcare market, the more global or developing market looked very differently, which was a project I was involved in to help us truly understand kind of what are the value drivers for the developing healthcare markets. But within the Western market, which has been stable and established for probably a couple of decades, it turns out that you've got some players in that market that are more key opinion leaders. So I'm talking about like the Mayo Clinics, the Memorial Sloan Ketterings, Johns Hopkins, et cetera. These are the opinion leaders for the rest of the oncology treatment marketplace internationally. And the fast followers, the high volume producers, they look to these key opinion leaders to help drive their decision making in terms of what are the best products. So giving a clear understanding, your key opinion leaders tend to be larger, but it's not driven strictly by revenue, not driven solely by number of patients treated. It has other factors in terms of what their needs are. These groups of clinical professionals, they're research oriented. They're looking to publish research which will help further establish their organization, their treatment organization as a leader. They want to be seen as a clinical trendsetter. They want to be doing the latest and most interesting treatments. And they're kind of a regional principal. They are a draw for miles and miles around. People come, will even fly in order to get treatment at this site. High volume producers, they're more distributed. They're more focused on efficiency. They're a clinical follower, and they're, as I said, they're more regionally distributed. So as you're guiding your portfolio decisions, you want to be looking at your new, in that case, the new product launches typically were guided to the key opinion leaders. Those were the people that were interested in the bleeding edge of what the new treatment capabilities are that are going to be introduced from the brand new products. The high volume producers, on the other hand, were more interested in enhancements for the more stable products. So as you can see from a life cycle perspective, typically within the first few years, it was all about what we call the KOLs, the key opinion leaders, that were buying the products, publishing new research, new treatments with those products. And then slowly, as we got enhancements, as the product got very stable, got more high volume, skill sets were more standardized, then the more high volume, the other segment would be more interested in these same products. So moving into the pharma space, obviously a lot more complex. You've got major differentiation across a number of different segments: patient, payer, provider. How are we doing on time? And they have different sorts of needs, right? In terms of efficacy, in terms of adoption, and various commercial aspects. As we apply that to portfolio decision making, from patient to provider to payer to provider, what we're looking at Sangamo is being able to do the trade-offs across these various segments and being able to introduce that into our prioritization discussion. As we get closer and closer to bringing our important therapies to market, what are the different facets of that market? Just as we saw with COVID vaccines, simple point around refrigeration. You saw notable different requirements in refrigeration across the major vaccines that were introduced. And that drove notable differences in terms of how easy it was for those vaccines to reach all the different patients and various patient needs. And so, our therapies have logistical restrictions and requirements as well. How does that play out, and how do we do those trade-offs? It's not all about efficacy. Efficacy is a very, very important criteria, but there's also imposition on the patient, how difficult it would be for them to accept treatment and go through the treatment. From the payer's perspective, what matters to them? What is their willingness to pay in terms of what are they used to? What are they accustomed to? And also the traditional cost of goods. What are they currently paying for similar treatments, and what's the cost to us to be able to get them to them? The cost of goods for get it to the providers. And then from the perspective of the provider's perspective, what are they used to administering now? What is the skill sets required? How do we make it easier for them? Again, getting back to their internal logistics, not just for us getting the therapy to the providers, but how are they going to carry, store, administer that particular therapy over time? All those different aspects need to be prioritized and weighted, and then applied to the various bets of the different projects. Again, this is purely hypothetical, but this is the conversation in terms of the process. How are we doing this to be able to identify the investments we want to make, and then applying the improvements against each project successively? So in summary, to go back to the very beginning, defining your voice of the customer data framework with your decision-making in mind is critical. The data you're collecting has to be differentiating. Your customer segmentation has to be clear, and you have to be collecting data that supports that segmentation, allows you to measure and then be able to take action and make decisions against those various segments. As you play that through, you need to be able to translate that into real portfolio options. Again, a recurring theme that we're hearing across various presentations during this entire event is your portfolio process has to be driving decision making. Otherwise, you may fall victim to just being a data repository, which is interesting, but it's not really taking advantage of the power of a portfolio process. And then as you come up with those options, you need to be able to prioritize and drive the trade-offs, because if everyone's got ideas, the question, you can't do them all. Which are the ones you want to pick? And then most importantly, don't forget to identify what scope you're going to remove. Trade-offs imply that you're not just going to select to do something, but you're going to stop doing something else, because we all have limited resources, right? So hopefully that helps. I invite questions to, and certainly as the panel discussion ensues, I'm looking forward to us having additional conversations around these topics, but hopefully this touches on some of the points that you all find valuable.
Thank you, Mark. It's such a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I have so many new ideas that I take home, and especially I like this idea of using the value drivers and the value mapping for segments. It's so visual, and I'm really impressed that that's something um, I will very much encourage to my project managers and portfolio managers to really spend time on this. I also like this major potholes that impact portfolio decision making. And I absolutely agree that we need to be more customer centric and also more risk centric in the decision making. And thanks for also mentioning about the biases that we should absolutely acknowledge that we are biased and not, and some of the decisions that we make may be flawed due to all the cognitive biases that might be acting, and that we are not just aware of that we are actually biased. So thanks for this wonderful wonderful presentation, and I invite the audience to stay tuned. We'll go backstage and we'll be coming back with other speakers in a minute. So stay tuned.
Thanks.